Hey everybody, welcome in again to the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast, the place where you can take our internet, but you will never take our wrestling. I am Griff from GA, and joining me today is Anthony from Down Under, and another new podcast guest this week, Ryan Gornault. Both are writers over on ProWrestlingMusings.com, so you can follow all of their work there. We got lots of stuff to talk about. Obviously, we got AEW. We have WrestleMania, not even a week old, so we have a couple select matches that we have statistics to present to you. Very interesting stuff. But we want to begin with WWE's releases that came down yesterday and reportedly may be continuing into today. So that is April 15th and 16th. This is obviously coming a year after the famous pandemic releases, Black Wednesday as it was called in 2020, when WWE released close to 100 staff members and wrestlers around this time last year, and it was very controversial. And this year's round of cuts are equally, maybe not equally, but certainly controversial in their own ways. The biggest name among them is Samoa Joe, of course. And if you've been following wrestling for any length of time, Samoa Joe, champion in Impact, champion in Ring of Honor, came to WWE, really blew everyone away. And he has been relegated to commentary over the last year plus due to his injuries and everything else. So he is gone along with several other names. So I want to ask you guys, and Anthony, we'll start with you. What do you make of these cuts today, and specifically Samoa Joe?
Thank you, as always, for having me. So in regards to the cuts, it's kind of going to be, I think, a regular thing. So the timing of the cuts is right before the Q1 investors call, which Vince does. So obviously wanting to make sure that that's as pretty as possible in order to make sure that the investors are happy and everyone's all good, so they can say, hey, look, we've made more push in order to make sure that we cut down on our budgets, we're increasing profits, you can see everything's moving along in the upward trajectory. So if you go back a couple of years, what we would have regular occurrences. Every couple of months you'd have a different person release here, a different person release there, and it was all sporadic. But ever since they sort of locked down the talent when it was first sort of started talking about AEW, they stopped doing that. And what I think has happened is that they're now just doing this mass release on a single day, and that's just before the investors call for Q1, which is one of the most important, because it's basically spreading out your entire financial year of, hey, this is good, we're doing good, we're great, let's invest, let's show you that the share price is going to go up. Right. So yeah, that's just from a pure, obviously, business perspective.
I think what's worth noting about that as well is this isn't the first time that we've seen WWE kind of take this angle. I remember, if any of you guys have watched the Ruthless Aggression documentaries that started airing on the WWE network last year, the one about John Cena actually mentioned offhand that this used to be done. WWE would make cuts around this time, and that came about because WCW was willing to pick people up, so WWE wanted to lock people in, and then later on you had a lot of indie promotions like TNA, Ring of Honor, that started to crop up as well. So WWE used to do it this way, and then they got away from it, as you said, to just kind of release people when they needed to, and now they've kind of gone back to this whole idea that there is this time that we are going to release people all in one block, and it just so happens to be, as you said, right before the Q1 investors call, where you're laying out your financial profile for the rest of the year.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, from a business perspective, obviously that's how they're now choosing to do things. The thing is, obviously, a lot of people have lost their jobs, and, it is extremely sad to hear. And I'm a huge fan of a lot of the people who do work, especially my fellow Aussies, Billy Kay and Peyton Royce. Very big soft spot for them. Right. Really, really surprised about Billy Kay. And Sean Rossap actually, I won't say what he reported, but he has reported about the reasonings behind her release, and they're very, very shocking. Obviously, that's on his Patreon. So go visit Fightful if you're wanting to know more about that one. But yeah, it's very surprising about that one. But yeah, she's both of them are well loved, but in the background, so in the back sort of thing by everyone. So that one actually is more surprising to me than Joe. Because Joe was obviously on the commentary, you know, he's probably wanting to fight again. You know, he's $1 million. He can go anywhere he wants. You know, he can write his own check. And I know so many people, including myself, are already fantasy booking him in every single company. I saw someone say, "Hey, let's put Samoa Joe versus Eddie Kingston in a promo off." And I'm just thinking, oh my God, I want that so much.
That could be the main event of a pay-per-view I paid $60 for, and that would be fine with me.
Yeah, same. So, yeah, for me, the more surprising one is Billie Kay and Peyton Royce, because both of them have recently been involved in storylines. Both of them recently wrestled. Billie Kay wrestled on WrestleMania Night 1. Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
That was only last week. Both of them are very well loved and liked backstage, and both of them are pretty over with the audience, especially Billie Kay. So, you know, for me, they are the most shocking ones, and I guess that's just my perspective of it. But, in terms of where they can go, you know, a lot of them have a lot of different choices. The one good thing about having the WWE branded behind you is that people know who you are. They can go back and see your work, so you can go, okay, this is what I can bring to you, and it's sort of helps you make a case for getting hired. Obviously, a lot of people, whether or not they go back to wrestling or not, it's going to be interesting time after the 90 days. I saw a joke about that. Jericho is going to have a whole lot of podcasts basically set up after 90 days, so as he did last time. So I'm looking forward to that.
Definitely. Ryan, what do you make of this whole thing, and specifically, as we keep alluding to, Samoa Joe being the biggest name now on the free market?
You know, I was definitely surprised about Samoa Joe being released, but afterwards I was thinking the same thing that everyone else was thinking. He was probably stuck on commentary. WWE probably wasn't going to use him in a wrestling capacity for a while, so he figured, you know what, might as well get out of the contract if they're not going to use me in a wrestling capacity, which I absolutely don't blame him. It definitely stinks to see him go, just because he obviously his stuff in WWE has been pretty top-notch, but he could do so much more. I mean, just look at everything he's done for Ring of Honor, Impact, on the Indies. His feuds with AJ Styles and Roman Reigns, they were excellent, but they weren't even like close to his best. So I'm as sad as I am that he's leaving. I'm happy that he has so many potential other choices. The only question right now is whether these promotions can actually afford him. Right. You know, I don't think many of them have Samoa Joe money. If anything, AEW will, but I really don't know. We'll see. They're spending money on Pixie songs for Orange Cassidy. That's probably going to cost a lot. So who knows where Samoa Joe will end up. I really want him to go to Japan, like a lot of people are saying. But rather than New Japan, I want to see him in Pro Wrestling Noah. I feel like that would just be mind-blowing. Him against the likes of like Katsuhiko Nakajima, Masa Kitamiya, it would just be insane. I also kind of want to see him in Major League Wrestling, just because I think a match between him and Jacob Fatu would be so good. I don't even know what else to say. It would just be kind of mind-blowing. But anyways, so Samoa Joe, as sad as I am, I'm happy he's going to get more opportunities elsewhere. I was definitely more shocked about Peyton Royce and Billie Kay being released. I mean, obviously, like everyone is saying, really well liked backstage, over with the fans. They feel like the ultimate sports entertainment package duo. You know, They don't have to be the best wrestlers in the world, but ultimately they were funny as hell. They could work well enough, you know. Yeah, that it just felt from off from left field, if that's the right expression to use. You get what I'm saying. It's yeah, they felt too entertaining, and especially Billie Kay having just had a match. I don't know where that storyline was going, especially with her with all of the resumes. But it was fun to watch, even if it didn't seem like there was gonna be an end to it. You know.
Yeah.
I don't know where they're gonna end up. I don't know whether another company will pick them up, whether they'll end up on the indies. I saw a couple people say that, oh, they'll end up in AEW just because Peyton Royce's man is Shawn Spears and he's in the Pinnacle in AEW. I really don't see that happening. It could be cool, but I don't see that happening. I don't know what's going to happen with them. I obviously hope they're successful wherever they go. Yeah, one last thing, Kalisto. No matter where he goes, he's going to be great.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if Kalisto will decide to go back to Mexico, maybe wrestle AAA, and so kind of, you know, by proxy, Kalisto might be a guy that we see in AEW just because of their relationship with AAA that we've seen guys. Obviously, Kenny Omega has held the AAA Mega Championship, and the Lucha Brothers, Laredo Kid, and all that kind of stuff. So I wonder if we might actually see Kalisto in AEW down the road just because of something like that. The thing about Samoa Joe's one of my favorites, and I think for a lot of people he is one of theirs. Pro Wrestling Noah is not a name that I've heard, but you know what? You're absolutely right. He'd have great matches there. I think he'd have great matches in Dragon Gate if he decided to go to Japan. I mean, he could do the whole tour of Japan if he wanted to, wrestle in every promotion and work in every promotion. Obviously, we at Pro Wrestling Musings and on this podcast, we're big AEW fans. That's really what we're focused on, more so than any other promotion in terms of the statistics that we keep, the articles that we write, podcasts, videos, all that kind of stuff. And so as a huge AEW mark myself, there's always a danger when you see anybody get released from anywhere to talk about, you know, this person to AEW. There's always a danger because let's not forget the reason WWE is in this position where they're releasing so many big names is because they had that mentality where just anyone who hit the market, WWE just put a blank check on the table and had them sign. And that's how you end up with AJ Styles, one of the best wrestlers in the world, winning a, let's face it, kind of meaningless tag team title and then not appearing on the show after he won it. You know, that's how we end up with that situation. So for AEW, they need to be very careful that everyone's first instinct is to say, you know, XYZ to AEW. And if they do that every time, you're going to end up with the phenomenal wrestlers in AEW taking a back seat to each new person that comes in. And eventually, you do need to have your stars. So Kenny Omega, if he's going to be the guy, he's got to be the guy. So he's always going to be on top. And then it might be Hangman Page. And so someone's going to fall behind. All of that is to say that if there was one name of anyone who has been released or on the market over the last year, Samoa Joe is the guy I want in AEW because he is so perfect for AEW. Everything he does. AEW is big on character and they want their guys to be able, they don't have 20-minute long promos like WWE does where you just get to say a bunch of stuff. They want their promos, their interviews to be punchy. They need you to get your point across quick, and so people can get to know your character very quick. You only have 2 hours a week on television, so we got to know who you are. And Samoa Joe, I don't know if there's anyone on the globe who is better able to convey his character in 10 seconds than Samoa Joe is. With one sentence, you know what Samoa Joe is about. So his promo style is perfect for AEW. His wrestling style, I think, is great for AEW because there is kind of this reputation that I don't agree with, but there is it kind of out there where AEW has a lot of high impact, athletic, lots of flips, lots of, high athletic moves. And Samoa Joe is very athletic for his size, but at the end of the day, he is a wrestler and he wrestles like that, and he's just like a brawler, a bruiser. It's a guy that AEW, in terms of their top level, they don't actually have a ton of. Doc Gallows comes to mind in terms of guys that can do kind of that style, but really no one like Samoa Joe. So I think he would be perfect for AEW. That's the guy I want to see But honestly, both of you said wherever he goes, he'll be a great fit. He will be interesting to watch, and he will draw a lot of eyes to wherever he ends up. There's no doubt about that. One last note about Joe. I think that when it comes to WWE, they put so much emphasis into WWE is the company that everyone knows. So that to WWE, that is extremely valuable, that name recognition. And when you talk to people, when I tell people, I'm a wrestling fan, their first thought, if they're not also a wrestling fan, is WWE. That's what they think of. That is very valuable for WWE. Now, eventually, that doesn't last forever, because you look at in the late 90s, that was WCW. WCW was the biggest company in the world for famously 83 weeks when they were beating Raw in the ratings war. So obviously that didn't work out too well for WCW. Now, I'm not saying WWE is going to go from best in the world to gone in 3 years. But the point is that name recognition doesn't last forever. And AEW eventually is going to want to have a little bit of that name recognition, that even casual fans will know this is AEW, this is what they're about. These are a few of the guys that I know from AEW. Samoa Joe is a guy who can be that, because you just gravitate towards Samoa Joe. You see him and you're like, that's a guy that I like. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's just there. He kind of has that personality where he makes wrestling easy to believe. There's a lot of people that don't watch wrestling because they're like, oh, it's fake. It's not real. And to me, no one makes suspension of disbelief easier than Brock Lesnar. And then just below Brock Lesnar is Samoa Joe. Like, what he does, it looks real in every way. So if you don't watch wrestling and then you see Samoa Joe, you're like, God, that guy is an actual badass. Like, in real life. That is very valuable, I think, as well to AEW. So at the end of the day, I hope everybody who has been given their release, I hope that they all land on their feet and they all go on to have a lot of success wherever it is they may go. At the end of the day, we all, we'll sit here and contemplate who might go where, what we might like to see, and all that kind of stuff. But these are real people. A lot of them have families, so I just hope that they are able to provide and do what they need to do for their families. And as both of you alluded to, for 90 days, we won't know what's going on. So I think we can put the conversation on pause until we start to see where these people start to end up after those no competes. So let's transition, talk a little bit about AEW and Dynamite this past week. I thought was a phenomenal show. It was a lot of fun top to bottom. And when you talk about the top of this show was the tag team title match between Rey Fenix and Pac and the Young Bucks. And I thought this was a phenomenal match, and it was a lot different, I think, than what I expected it to be. So as we look at our statistics over on ProWrestlingMusings.com, you can follow along with us, and we look at this match. We'll start with Ryan. What did you think about this match? Was this something that you expected to see from the Young Bucks?
So the thing about Young Bucks matches, for me, generally speaking, it usually takes me a few watches to really get them, especially the longer ones and the bigger ones. I know when their Revolution match against Adam Page and Kenny Omega came out, everyone was raving about it, and I was just kind of sitting here like, okay, it was good, but I don't really see the appeal. Same thing with their match against FTR. Obviously, I ended up getting it after a few watches, and both of those matches were pretty amazing. I haven't had that yet with this match. I will give Rey Fenix a ton of credit because he's one of the best in the world. I'll also give the Young Bucks credit because I don't think their style in this match was way too different than what they usually do. It just felt just a little bit slowed down because they're doing all of the crazy flips and stuff just at a slower rate, Mm-hmm. So ultimately, I don't think it was way too different. I like the attitude that they're going for, though. I think that, like, if they could toe the line between trying to be, like, fully serious bad guys and halfway between that and their PWG antics, I think that could be, like, the perfect middle ground for them. Not too obnoxious, but not too serious at the same time. I think this was a good start if they're trying to go that lane. I definitely want to rewatch the match a few more times. At this point, I don't see it as a 5-star match like Meltzer does, but I enjoyed it while I was watching it. It was pretty good. I had a good time.
5 stars?
He gave it 5 stars.
Really? Okay, now that's a little interesting, because to me, I feel like they left like 70% of what they could do on the table. Like, I feel like there's more matches to come, and this was the worst of the ones that we're going to get eventually. That's just what I thought out of it.
It was definitely... I don't think it was as good as any of the Young Bucks and the Lucha Brothers matches, just to give an example. Obviously, Pac being in there makes the dynamic totally different. Now, people are going to hate me for this. I'm not the biggest fan of Pac, like, following his WWE run. He almost reminds me of the high-flying Randy Orton, in a way. Like, his high-flying style is almost, like, too methodical for me.
That's interesting.
I think he's still a great worker, but yeah, but even he put in good work here, so I can't really complain about him, you know?
Well, we could go on for a long time talking about Pac and Phoenix and, you know, who these guys, who of these 4 guys are better and everything else. But what's more important, I think that you said, is the fact that the Young Bucks, you said they didn't look too different in this match to you. And originally, I disagree with that, because I'm thinking, well, they look a lot different. But if you look at the statistics of this match compared to the Young Bucks over their AEW careers, it's actually remarkably similar. And again, you can follow along with us over on ProWrestlingMusings.com. But when you look at, you know, a high strike down percentage, that's something that they're known for. When you look at a lot of tags, that's something that they're known for. Lots of taunts, that's something that they're known for. This is actually a very, very similar Young Bucks team in terms of the way they performed, down to even the amount of time that they'll put you in submissions. It's actually very similar to what we've seen from them, but it felt so much different to me. I felt like I was watching a totally different team. So, Anthony, when you see these statistics actually lining up so that the Bucks don't look that much different from, you know, what they were doing a few weeks ago when they were babyface, they felt a lot different to me. How did they do that?
All right, so we'll go to and have a look at the minute by minute, because there's something I want to show. So for me, if you look at about the 12 to 15 minute to 15 to 18 minute, you can see that's where the Death Triangle have just taken control of this match. They've gone up and, you know, they're effectively the baby faces for this match. Right. And they've just taken control. So you can see that there's a massive difference in that they control this match. Now, Bucks had a really good percentage of it, and that's where they get, you know, the middle part. But that towards the end there, and what strikes to me, and I think this is where you might be feeling the difference, is it's not about the style, but about the attitudes. Now, ripping off the mask obviously is a massive, massive thing to remove a luchador's mask. And for me, that was a desperation move from them, as in they would do anything to win. And for me, I think it was more about the attitude around how they were doing it. It wasn't what they were doing. It was how they were doing it. It was what they were doing, you know, how they were acting, how their facials were. And that's why it might have felt a real big difference. When you look at it, it was more about the attitude and their portrayal of their characters rather than their actions. They're still the great team, and this is something that they've said on Twitter, and even, you know, recently they're like, oh, look, we've done another 5-star match. And I was very surprised about the 5-star match as well. I looked up on what was it? BNR, who do reports as well, and they gave it a B+ for that match. So I was really surprised that it was like that. Grapple, I think, is like 4.5, 4.75. So, really, really interesting about how it got 5. I personally wouldn't give it 5. I don't think, for me, 5 is like, it's a perfect match, or as close to perfect as you can get. And I just didn't get that from this one. It was a great match, 100%, absolutely great. But yeah, I agree with what you've said, that I think that there's still a lot to go and what they can actually do. But yeah, for me, I think it's more the attitude, the way they went around it, and a lot of the conversation around it after the match was about how good it was, but it was also about whether or not the Young Bucks shoes, which are like these really, really expensive shoes, were fake or not. And there was I saw a few people on Twitter like had photos of the shoes versus real shoes, and they're measuring the distance between the base and the emblems and seeing whether or not the that was the same distance between the real ones. So like, you know, that to me is great character work, that they're like, hey, we're going to go and wrestle this wrestling match in these really expensive shoes because we can.
Yes.
And, you know, I think that's where it comes down, that it's the attitude and the acting and the portrayal of the characters, which is slightly different, and different enough that their whole argument is that they are the best team in the world. They have always been the best team in the world. So they're not going to change the way that they fight, but they're going to change how they fight in a different way, which is their attitude.
To me, there's something distinctly heelish about ignoring the fans in the stadium and talking directly to the fans on TV, like pointing into the camera or, you know, yelling at the camera, something like that. Like, there's something so heelish about that, because all these people in the audience, they paid tickets to see you. They paid money so that they could see you, and you're just ignoring them so that you can talk to the people who are watching for free on TV. And that is a huge difference that the Bucks started to do. There were times where they get in a flurry of moves that, like, they so often do, and they did control 51% of this match. So they were slightly they were slightly ahead in terms of offense percentage, and as you alluded to, for large chunks of this match, they were way ahead. And so they go through this flurry like they so often do, and at the end, the babyface Bucks would turn around and they'd flex, or they'd get on the ropes and they'd celebrate with the crowd, and the crowd would cheer them and everyone would go crazy. That is classic babyface Young Bucks, just classic babyface in general. In this match, they didn't do that. They'd hit their flurry, and then Nick Jackson would turn around and start yelling at the camera. He'd start talking to the camera, talking to us, the TV audience, directly. It seems like a very small difference, but like I said, to me, that is such a heelish thing to do, and it shows that the Young Bucks, for all the grief that they take about being spot monkeys and about, you know, they're just work rate guys and all this kind of stuff, they get it. They know how to be great characters. And so you can say, yeah, Matt Jackson overacts a little bit. Yeah, Nick Jackson kind of looks like he's, you know, not all there sometimes, like he's kind of tuned out from the story. You can say all that. But these guys know how to build characters. They know how to make themselves become characters. And that's not something that you can say of a lot of people in the business right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that goes back to the point I was saying, that it's not the match itself or the way that they fight that's the difference. It's the way that they're portraying their characters, and what they're doing during the match is actually the difference there. And it's refreshing to see. I think that they're much better as heels. So yeah, it's now in time. I was thinking you were talking about this once before, where everyone's pretty much expecting Mox and Eddie to maybe take the titles off of them now, which would be just great. Give Eddie some gold.
That would be interesting. Because there's a couple teams now, because obviously you do have Death Triangle, you do have Pac and Phoenix. You've got FTR, who are just kind of lingering there, and obviously they're right now involved with the Blood and Guts feud with the Inner Circle, but eventually we all know that FTR is going to come back for those titles, so they're kind of sitting there waiting in the wings. The Best Friends have been number one contenders, it seems like, for like 3 months now. They've been ranked number one in those rankings. So it feels like there are a lot of teams that could step up to challenge the Young Bucks, and to me it is kind of remarkable how one change of character for the Bucks suddenly turns the tag division from there's a lot of great teams here, but it doesn't quite work for me, to my God, any of these teams could put on the best match of any given night, and I can't wait to see all of it. And it just shows you how important character is in wrestling. Ryan, do you have anything else to add about this incredible tag team match?
I don't actually know if I have anything else to add. I didn't even think about the possibility of Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley going for the titles. Obviously they're a great team based on what we've seen, but I kind of figured it would be a one-off, a two-off thing. But yeah, I kind of want to see them go for the titles now.
That would actually, I think cool. I think it'd be crazy to see them go, because their style is so different from the Bucks. The way that the Bucks, as we've seen, they're not going to make a huge change stylistically, even though they're heels now. So you're looking at Moxley and Kingston, probably the two most well-known brawlers in the company, going against the Bucks, who are the Young Bucks that we've known for years. That's how they're wrestling. And so obviously stylistically, that makes a tremendous matchup. Sounds like something that Sergi should address at some point if we are going to get that match over on our Styles Make Fights series on ProWrestlingMusings.com. Let's talk about, Ryan, the Red Velvet Jade Cargill match. This was something that I didn't think that we'd spend a lot of time with when I saw it, on the card, and thinking, okay, it's going to be a showcase for Jade Cargill. We know that. But this, to me, this is one of the stiffest women's matches I have ever seen in any American promotion ever. Like, these two women, they look like they were legitimately trying to knock each other out. And that is something that I feel like a lot of women's wrestling is missing, kind of that stiffness that you get from two people who in storyline absolutely hate each other. And that's what we got here. Lots and lots of strikes, 29 combined strikes between the two of them in just 6.5 minutes, 5 combined grapples, no submissions. It was entirely based around who can hit the other woman harder. And ultimately, Jade Cargill did end up winning the thing. I think that Jade is going to be the one in line for a push at some point. That seems to be the case. But, man, I really liked this match a lot more than I thought I would. What were your thoughts on it, Ryan? Ryan's internet is not doing us a whole lot of good right now.
I had a great time with this match. Your comment about it being stiffer than so many other women's matches, I'm just desensitized watching too much. I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Hello? Oh no, you still can't hear me?
No. We're good, man.
No?
We're good.
Yeah. God.
Red Velvet didn't.
Okay.
Red Velvet didn't like the way we were talking.
No, I guess not. But yeah, so I've been watching a lot of AJW matches, so maybe that's why I didn't notice that they were going extra stiff. Overall, I thought the match was great. You're totally right. It did look like they pretty much hated each other. And that to me shows that not only are they great wrestlers, but they're great actors too. So I could totally see them becoming the next big things in AEW. And I hope that does happen. As you said, so many strikes and strike downs compared to like 5 grapples, no submissions. Overall, it was just pretty much a brawl. For being Jade Cargill's 4th match ever, I believe. I think that's right. She's just incredible. And Red Velvet has been going at this for a bit longer. I think I read since like 2016, something along those lines. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're definitely excellent. What I was really surprised about, I don't know if this, I'm going to check right now. So on Cage Match, they have a rating of 5.63, which I'm really surprised about. I thought it was a lot better than just about a 6, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I was definitely impressed. I want to see them go longer. I don't think that's going to happen as long as Jade Cargill. I mean, I think Jade Cargill needs to continue doing as good as she is doing, and eventually she'll get longer matches. But we don't need her to have longer matches. We just want to see her continue to dominate, you know?
Yeah.
I definitely hope that she does get a bigger push down the line. I see a lot of people online saying she could be the next Brock Lesnar for AEW. And I wouldn't go that far, but I agree with the general sentiment that she could be the next big thing for the company. Overall, I enjoyed this. I enjoyed how concise it was. Overall, it was a fun time.
Can't disagree with anything you said there. Anthony, do you have any thoughts on this, or is there anything else from AEW Dynamite this week that really caught your eye?
A couple little things. So I think for me, this was just a great show for both characters. So I think we all knew Jade was going to win. I think a lot of people have speculated that she might get the Goldberg treatment with a massive undefeated streak. You know, she fights once every now and then, but she always wins and is just, you know, built up very slowly. I'd like that. I think that she is money. She looks great. She is just unnatural. So that would be great to see her get that. But obviously you needed to protect Red Velvet, who's just has done so much work. I remember seeing her come up through that dark system, you know, losing, and then suddenly starting to get wins, pushing her character, and now she's officially signed. Absolutely 100% deserves it. You don't want to bury someone like that. So for me, letting them have that red hot start where she's attacking up before the bell, it shows, yep, this is personal. Let's go. You know, both women got to show off their stuff, and that is so important, especially when you're like, okay, this person is definitely going to win, but let's put over both people. And that, for me, is really, really interesting. Now, one little thing I just found out. So AEW for the day. I know that we're going to talk about this, or maybe, but AEW obviously did 1.219 million views for the show. Now, I've talked about this, and I've actually done an article about it on Pro Wrestling Musings, about that YouTube is probably more the views is better to speculate how popular something is, okay, over these ratings. These ratings are rather nothing. My point is the Bianca Belair, Raquel Gonzalez, and Rhea Ripley video from NXT currently is sitting on 1.25 million YouTube video views. It has beaten AEW's views on YouTube alone. And then there's a further 143,000 just on the views on the USA YouTube as well. So, you know, that to me is just crazy how many people are actually watching wrestling. Yes, it is a bit of a different format, but it just shows that, you know, that moment on NXT, I know we don't really talk about it, but that moment of all those three champions together was great. In regards to AEW, Jericho versus Hardwood was a good match. I don't agree with Tyson being involved, but that's, you know, my own personal reasons. Allen versus Hardy. One really important thing about that one, it was reported and confirmed that was actually a pre-taped fight and was pre-taped just a few days after Matt Hardy lost his father. So just the massivest, you know, how hard that match would have been for him to do in those circumstances just shows what sort of person Matt Hardy is. And also there was a big point of that it was the first time that the announcers table was broken in AEW's history since it started. And they made a big deal out of it. So, you know, for me, just it's those little things that is like, okay, this is the first time this has happened and everyone's made a big deal of it. So, yeah, like just some really interesting stuff about AEW and that. And I'm really happy because at the end of the day, the main event once again was held by Allen and just shows that, you know, we're hitting these numbers and there's no Moxley, there's no Kenny. There's no, you know, the biggest names or most well-known names were Young Bucks and Jericho, and you know, we're really seeing these numbers, these massive numbers without those big draws, and that's really exciting, really good to see.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think Darby Allin is quickly becoming a big draw. And I think you can say that about a lot of guys. Eventually, I think the conventional wisdom is eventually Hangman Page is going to be the biggest draw in the company. I think eventually MJF is going to be the biggest draw in the company. But I mean, we could talk for hours about, you know, face versus heel and who draws more or whatever. The point is, there are a lot of people that AEW can hang their hats on, and we'll talk about a couple of them specifically in just 1 second. But you mentioned the Darby Allin Matt Hardy match, and I do want to talk about, again, from a statistical perspective, this was a clinic from Darby Allin when it comes to playing the underdog babyface. We talk about it so often with Darby, but it's just a role that he plays so well, and it's so effective, and it doesn't lose me like a lot of underdog baby faces do. I've talked about this before in my power rankings. I've talked about it on the podcast. A lot of underdog baby faces just totally lose me. I completely tune out of matches because I just don't care and I don't believe it. But Darby Allin, he gets his ass kicked for 15 minutes of this match, and I believed every second of it. Like this, there is nobody that sells a near fall the way that Darby Allin does, because he just looks like totally dead. I mean, so he gets leg dropped. Matt Hardy comes off a ladder with a leg drop through a table backstage on Allin, and Allin sells it like he's dead. And I'm like, that's it. Hardy's the TNT champion. We're done. And I actually bit on that. And Darby Allin kicks out, and just, he kicks out of the twist of fate on a chair. Like Darby Allin is so good at making you believe that he is, getting his ass kicked, and he just ekes it out in the end. And that's what he's made an entire AEW career of doing in this match. The minute by minute totals, it's exactly what you're expecting to see. Matt Hardy on top through 15 minutes of this match, and then eventually Darby Allin claws his way back in, and in the last minute and a half, Darby Allin finally gets on top, and he hits that crazy coffin drop off the scaffolding through the announce table. They sold it like it was the biggest thing that's happened on Dynamite, and it works. You can't go overkill, and this is kind of a microcosm. The announce table is a microcosm of wrestling in general. You're gonna break that announcer's table once, and you sell it like it's crazy, and everyone goes nuts. If you do it again next week, you lose its effectiveness, and then it keeps going and keeps going and keeps going, and less is more in wrestling. So for Darby Allin, less is more. You can't have every babyface acting like Darby Allin. Not every babyface can be fighting from behind all match the way Allin does, but Allin does it, and he's so good. He's made a career of doing it, at least in AEW, and it just works. And eventually, whoever is going to take the TNT title off of him, it's going to be all that much more effective, because Allin has, crawled out of so many matches where he's just won it by the tip of a fingernail. And so the guy that finally does beat him, that guy is going to be a huge star. And that's all you want from any champion, from any champions, to be a star while they hold the belt, and then pass that star power on to the next guy that's able to win that title. To me, Darby Allin has been a perfect TNT champion, exactly what you want to see from him, and the statistics show Darby Allin just works.
Yeah, definitely agree with you in regards to how he is, and just it's becoming a great little slot for him, and a great slot for us as well as a viewer, that we know that, hey, Darby Allin's on. This is going to be a great match. I'm going to enjoy this because of what we're going to see, And yeah, I agree. Whoever's going to take the belt, I thought that they might have put it on Hardy because of the whole money storyline, and they could probably use a big win, but at the end of the day, there was a lot of outside gang faction warfare, which I guess distracted from that enough to show that maybe his heart wasn't in it. He couldn't get the job done, and I think that's the whole thing, that everyone who's lost yet has done a great job of trying to put him down, but they just cannot get that job done, and that's the big thing with Darby and how he comes across, that you can't beat me because you can't keep me down.
Yeah, that's definitely the story he's told, and like I said, it really works. It really, really works. And the great thing about the way AEW structures their matches, we've said it before, the way they produce their matches, the reason that we can do statistics the way that we do them like this is because AEW puts so much thought into the way that they do their matches, the way that they're produced. So it makes sense statistically. Darby Allin fights like Darby Allin all the time, and it always looks like this. It always looks, the match offense percentage is always heavily stack towards Darby's opponent. The minute-by-minute total always looks like a straight line until Darby Allin, finally is able to pull ahead in the very last seconds of the match. It's a guy in Darby Allin and whoever produces his matches that really understands his character, and his character comes through in his matches, in his promos. He just is Darby Allin, and ultimately those are the best characters. I compare all the time to, in my opinion, probably the best character in existence in the history of wrestling is Stone Cold Steve Austin, who just that's who he was. His promos, when he was guesting on commentary, his interviews, his matches, he just was Stone Cold Steve Austin. It was so easy to believe that that's the guy I was watching, and AEW, I think, has bought into that strategy of making characters, not gimmicks, but characters. And to me, that's a lot more effective. Ryan, how do you think about Darby Allin in this match and in general? Is he an effective champion to you? Or are you buying into the kind of underdog babyface role that he plays?
So my answer is going to be a little bit biased because there's external circumstances that are kind of making me see less of him. So obviously you have the whole speaking out thing. I'm not going to go into details about it. I think that's definitely one of the reasons why I don't like him. But beyond that, you mentioned earlier about how he keeps on getting back up and he just barely wins matches. That to me, it doesn't feel like he's champion, even though he is champion. He feels like he's always the dude who's just this close to getting the championship, even though he's champion. I know that doesn't make sense. It doesn't feel like he's the champion based on his performances, even no matter what you think of the quality of his performances. The statistics show that he's getting continually beaten down and beaten down and beaten down. To me, it's not just about being able to sustain punishment. It's about being able to dish out punishment. And I don't think the amount of punishment that he has to deal with is almost even with the amount of punishment he has to give out to win, in a sense. I feel like it should... You get what I'm saying? Because I feel like it should have taken him a lot more to beat Matt Hardy, considering how badly Matt Hardy beat Darby Allin.
I definitely understand. Sometimes the underdog babyface it's hard to do it as a champion. As we talk, there's a trope in wrestling that a lot of guys are better as challengers than they are as champions, and a lot of those guys happen to be underdog babyfaces. It's very hard to sell that if you are a champion. So I totally get where you're coming from. It's more effective for me. I think it works for me, but it doesn't work for everyone, and there's absolutely no problem with that because I absolutely see where you're coming from.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm not into him all that much. That I don't even have anything else to say about that. I just don't think that he is championship material, honestly.
Well, let me ask you very, very quickly, whether or not you believe that he's championship material or whatever. He is a champion now, so eventually, whoever takes that belt off of him, do you think that at the very least, Darby Allin is doing enough to make the next guy look better, elevate the next guy by winning that TNT championship?
I don't think so, because if his matches continue being the way that they are, then it's going to look like Darby Allin's going to get beat up the entire time, and he's going to end up losing. It's going to be shaped like all of his other matches, I feel. So then there's not going to be any payoff, basically. It's not that it's going to make whoever beats him look bad. It's just going to make it look too easy.
Less effective than, whoever beats like Kenny Omega or the Young Bucks is what you're saying.
Right. Okay. So for the TNT title, Darby Allin beating Cody Rhodes was effective because Cody Rhodes was basically winning the entire time, and then at the very last second, Darby Allin rolls him up for the pinfall. That seemed like a much more effective transfer of star power than any future thing. Oh, if you find a guy who's smaller than Darby Allin and gets beat up more than Darby Allin, then maybe in that case the star power will transfer more effectively, but I just don't see that happening in most situations. You have to get like Marco Stunt to beat him for that to work, you know? Which I want to happen now that I say it. That would actually be pretty awesome.
Yeah, well, you know what? Everything makes sense to me. Ultimately, Darby Allin works for me, and for a lot of people, he does work. But I think you make a great point that there's a sizable chunk of people out there that this may very well not work for. And ultimately, you know, what can we say other than, you know, if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. Thankfully, AEW is a 2-hour show. Dynamite is a 2-hour show. And one of the things that took about a minute of this 2-hour show was my favorite thing to happen on this episode of Dynamite. And I will be honest here. I'm about to rave about this particular minute of the show. You guys, as we conclude our Dynamite discussion, do not have to talk about this particular part if there's something else you want to talk about. But I want to talk about this. The debut of Anthony Ogogo is one of my absolute favorite debuts in the last 2 years. Probably one of the best debuts that Dynamite or that AEW has had. I'm not being facetious. I actually believe that. This factory storyline, I know that Anthony was not very high on it when it started, so I'll be curious to know if this has worked better for Anthony in the last couple weeks since he's been on the podcast. But this, to me, this debut of Ogogo, it worked so well. I loved every second of this, and it was short. It left me wanting more, which at the end of the day is exactly what you want to see. It just, everything about it was perfect. Like Anthony Ogogo is a smarmy, dislikable character. Like you just see him, and for me especially, you know, I'm American, so he does get that cheap, you know, oh, America sucks, England's better kind of pop out of me, where it's like, you know, I just boo him just because, you know, he puts down America. So there is a little bit of that, but mostly it's just like the way he carries himself. Like talk about a guy who gets it. He just understands how the way that you walk, the way you look, the way you know, stare at the camera, like all these little things is the difference between someone who I'm being told is a bad guy and someone who is a bad guy. You know what I mean? And it works. And the ending of that match where he just lets loose a right into the guy's gut and the referee stops it. To me, the only thing that could have made it better is if the guy had then gotten up and then collapsed, you know, like 10 seconds later. Because really, if you watch boxing or MMA, that's what body KOs look like. Like if you kick someone or you punch someone in the liver, it takes them a few seconds for their body to register that has just happened. So I would have loved to see him, you know, unleash that right, and the guy gets up, and then Ogogo just stands there, and the guy crumples, and the referee calls the match. That's the only thing that I think would have made that segment better. But what you've done is you've put over Anthony Ogogo, former Olympic boxer. This guy, one punch will knock you out. And it is one of those things that scales, you know? So we talk all the time about protecting finishers, right? Kenny Omega, the one-winged angel, the most protected move in all of wrestling. You know, we talk about how do we protect finishers? Well, some finishers, in my opinion, they don't necessarily need to be protected as long as they scale. You know what I mean? So you know, if Ogogo's taking on kind of lower level competition, they haven't been built yet, they haven't been pushed, one punch and the referee has to stop the fight. Like they're totally gone. Then when he takes a step up the card, if he's fighting, you know, lower mid-card guys, one punch and he gets a 3. He's fighting higher mid-card guys, 2 punches needs to get it done. And then and eventually, if he's the guy that fights Cody Rhodes in a singles match on pay-per-view, he needs 3 punches to beat Cody Rhodes. You know, that kind of thing. As long as it scales, I'm okay with that, because you're still putting this guy over. This guy's an Olympic boxer. One punch can end you. You know what I mean? And so that what I loved about this, there's no statistics to talk about. It was a minute-long match. there was like one lockup and then one strike from Ogogo, and that ended it. But what I loved about it was you are trying to build me a new character that I'm supposed to care about, that I'm supposed to be invested in, a new group that I'm supposed to be invested in. And what you've done is in like a minute, this is one of my favorite characters. I want to see him every week. I want to know what he's doing. I want to hear from him. I want to see him improve. They have made me buy into everything that the factory is doing. And you know what? Maybe it's just me. But I'll admit, I am biased because I knew Anthony Ogogo from when he was boxing. I watched him in the Olympics. I knew who he was before I even got into wrestling. So I am a little biased to see someone that I knew previously, have success. But ultimately, even if I remove my bias, I love this story. I love everything about the factory. I love Anthony Ogogo. And with that, I will stop talking about it because everyone's probably bored. So, Anthony, I want to ask you, does the factory work for you now? And if the answer is no, then by all means talk about something else that you'd rather talk about, because I understand if not everyone wants to hear 10 minutes about a 1 minute long segment on Dynamite.
Look, let's keep this nice and quick, okay? Because I agree. I don't think we need to spend too long. Just a real quick one. So I looked up, as I said, I've checked out some ratings here, and the ratings for that Ogogo section on the sorry, I'm just quickly getting the name of the website. Bleacher Report, that's the one I'm using. So Bleacher Report, they gave it a D, that segment.
They gave it a D?
So, they gave it a D.
No.
And their first line is, "This wasn't exactly the most impressive debut."
What?
Yep. So I just wanted to read that because I knew you said before time you're like, look, I'm going to talk about this because I love this. Now, I'm going to go from a different perspective of when I saw this, I thought, what the hell? And look, I've never been punched by an Olympic boxer. I hope that luck continues because it does not sound like a fun time. But yeah, look, to me, I saw that and I was like, what the hell just happened? And this is just, I'm more of a wrestling fan rather than a combat sports fan. So for me, I've just watched these guys go to town with each other. So, we've had that pack and all that where they're putting all these moves into each other. We had that match between Jericho and that later on where they're putting all these moves into each other, and then you're seeing this guy just do one punch. Now, for me, it was actually after the match where I was turned. So I was reading a few people's comments online saying, it was to a jobber. So you're expecting this guy just to be able to defeat him. Now, the biggest thing that actually worked for me was that someone pointed out that there was actually a women's UFC, I think it was UFC fight.
It was one championship.
Yeah, Ed, an hour after, and I remember tagging you in it on Twitter, and it was basically one of the female fighters kicked the other fighter in the gut once, and she was down. And the ref immediately called it. Because for me, it was that ref stoppage, that immediate ref stoppage. I thought it was too quick, personally, because this is just new for me. I've not come across this. And this is, I think, where it's all come across that this is something new that we've not really seen before. So it's gonna take time, but I agree that this could be something as long as they handle it correctly. He can't go, and I think this is where a lot of people are like, oh well, where does this lead to? Does he one punch John Moxley? That was one of the immediate conversations on Twitter. Does this, and I think you're right. As long as it scales correctly, as long as we can see him having to deliver more of these punches, more devastating, more of this as he scales up, then it's fine. And, there's plenty of actual combat footage showing that these people, they can get knocked down in one hit. And I think it's just something new for wrestling fans. So for people like me who might not be as big of fans as combat sports, it's just something new. And I think it's just coming across that way. So I'm interested to see where it goes. I remember us arguing over who was the biggest come away out of that initial breakup, and me and Sergi was all on for Nick, and you're like, no, it's definitely a go-go. It's 100% a go-go. So you're right. I was wrong on that one.
Well, for now, there's still some time.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that I'm pretty sure AEW are like, nah, this guy's money. Let's get on board the go-go train. So I'm interested to see what happens. I want to see how they do handle it. Mm-hmm. And as long as they handle it right, then and they show why he is, keep showing that. And that's I think where the really important part, that it's handled really well, and they just need to be very careful with it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought in that perspective about someone who, has not watched a lot of combat sports and is just a pro wrestling fan. I think that's so valuable, because you make a great point. For me, seeing those body shot knockouts, I mean, as someone who was a huge combat sports fan before I ever got into wrestling, that stuff, I've seen it before. It's rare. It's obviously more common to see someone get hit in the jaw and get knocked out. But those body shot KOs, they do happen. And so it's a great perspective from someone who, hadn't seen a lot of that. And so AEW, I think that's something that AEW needs to keep in mind. You do have to introduce that this isn't just some made up thing that we're doing for the sake of professional wrestling. This is something that Anthony Ogogo is actually capable of doing. Like, in real life, he can knock someone out by hitting you in the liver. And I totally agree with you. If they do it right, I think there's dollar signs pouring out of Anthony Ogogo. He has the look. He's a really good looking guy. He's got the accent. He has crossover appeal, not only in terms of combat sports and wrestling, but also in the mainstream. He is already mainstream in England. He is a really well-known boxer in the UK, and maybe that's something we could ask some of our UK writers about later on down the line. There is money in Anthony Ogogo, and I think AEW does recognize that. Ryan, do you want to comment on this? And if you don't, is there anything else that you might? Because again, this is a lot of conversation about a 1-minute segment on Dynamite.
Right. So I was actually in the exact same boat. I didn't get I didn't realize how monumental that moment was until that one championship match, and where she gets kicked in the liver. I also don't watch boxing. I have minimal exposure to MMA. Basically, any MMA fight I've seen are kind of like highlights on Twitter, where there's like this crazy ass knockout at the end. So I didn't necessarily know that fights end like that in real life.
Yeah.
So like, until I saw that like an hour after, I understood what they were going for, but it didn't really have that impact. Obviously, Anthony Ogogo is a super powerful guy and a super skilled guy, so I get why they would do the punch. I just didn't get the context behind it, I guess. I think it was definitely effective. I think him as a character is effective. Anything else I say is just going to be repeating your points, honestly, in praising him. So it's not even worth me talking anymore about him. I think he's great, and I think it worked now that I know how all the context behind that punch, basically.
Well, I love talking to you guys, man. That's it. You've got so many perspectives that I did not have coming into this because of the background that I do have as a sports fan and as a wrestling fan. So I love hearing this from you guys. And I think this is a great time to mention something that I really, really believe in. My enjoyment or lack thereof does not and should not detract from anyone else's enjoyment or lack thereof of anything. So this Anthony Ogogo, this whole thing, it worked for me. I love it. I would want to see him for 20 minutes on my TV every week. You may not. If you don't, that's fine. It doesn't make me enjoy Anthony Ogogo any less. You know what I mean? I still love what he does. And I think we just saw this earlier. Ryan and I talking about Darby Allin. I enjoy what Darby Allin's been doing. Ryan doesn't. Ultimately, we both watch AEW every week. And if Darby Allin comes onto the screen, it works for me. It doesn't work for Ryan. We still watch. And something that Ryan likes, if it doesn't work for me, I still watch. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't, my dislike of it or like of it, whatever, it doesn't affect, what everyone else likes. So if you love Ogogo or you don't, I think we are offering perspectives that will just make you think, even if you don't like it still, then you just think, you know what? I understand why Griff might love it from moment one, and for Ryan and Anthony, it kind of was a little bit of a process to get there. And that's what I love doing about this podcast, man. There's so many different perspectives that we have at Pro Wrestling Musings from people that believe all these different things. And that's what I love about it. I really do love doing stuff like this. So as we're done with what actually happened on the Dynamite show, I think we would be remiss to not mention the fact that AEW, of course, was competing unopposed on Wednesday for the first time in their existence, as NXT has moved to Tuesday. And I think enough people at this point know that the move is more to do with hockey. The fact that that NHL on Wednesday nights is moving to USA. It doesn't have much to do with the fact that NXT was losing to AEW or something like that. I never got too into the ratings war because, again, I love AEW, so I'm going to watch whether it's doing a 1.6 or a 0.4. I'll watch it either way. It doesn't matter to me. But I do think that it's something that we should mention. And Anthony, you have a great perspective on this. And I do think it's worth noting that, AEW finishes with, I think, a 1.2 rating on Wednesdays. The only thing that I thought coming out of this was, you know what? WWE was right. We may not like the fact that they were counter-programming NXT with AEW, basically sacrificed NXT just to hurt AEW, but that's pretty much what they did. AEW was, doing a 0.8, competing with NXT, and then suddenly they're running unopposed. It's not even like a huge show. It's not like they were doing, Winter is Coming or something like that, where it's this massive show they've been building up to. Just a normal Dynamite, and they do a 1.2. They pop a 1.2. WWE was right. If they put NXT with AEW, they will cut into AEW's fans. So if that's what WWE wanted to do, then that's what they were doing. But Anthony, you've been bringing up different perspectives on this and talking about this. Talking about the ratings, what really stood out to you? Is there something that you feel like is not being talked about that people should really know and pay attention to?
Yeah, look, the main thing I want to, say is that we shouldn't get too excited. AEW has, for the last few weeks, been on a decline. Really worrying decline, actually. They've been falling across their total numbers for the last few weeks. So, and it was really worrying about the direction that they're heading. So to see them now hit this number is great. However, it's next week. That is the real test. This week, there's the excitement. Everyone's excited because WrestleMania was just on. WrestleMania is still the biggest wrestling event in the world. There's no denying it. It is. You've got all the indies who all wrestle around that time. You've got all these shows. That entire week is so busy for everyone. I watched more wrestling in the last week than I have for the last 2 years, just because it is just there's so much available and so much great stuff is happening during those 2 weeks. So there is an expected increase to viewers, and we saw that. So one of the biggest takeaways is that Raw this week, the Raw after Mania, it has always been pushed as this big thing, this big special thing by WWE. Raw this week was ahead of AEW Dynamite in all the demos. That's normally not what happens. They normally beat them in total views, but the demos, AEW normally beat Raw. However, Raw beat them this week, and that was simply because there's more eyes on the product, and I think that might have come here to push AEW up higher in the ratings. Now, obviously, that's next week is the real test. Next week, if they can do this same number, then we know, okay, cool, it was 100%, the NXT thing. Are people actually going to stick around? And that is the case that has been through AEW's history of whether or not they're going to keep this massive amount of number, or whether or not they're going to keep to their around 700 to 800,000 regular number. because that's what they were doing when they had the war. So for me, it's all about next week. This week was great to see. I'm so happy that they got that big number. It is just so good to see the amount of people watching. I want everyone to watch wrestling because, the more people watch it, the more people I can talk to about it and get excited about it. I want to go down and talk to as many people as I possibly can about this because I really enjoy it so much. So for me, seeing that is great, but it's next week is going to be the question, whether or not all the shows, not just AEW, whether or not, so NXT hit 800,000, after, really solid takeover, really solid WrestleMania, they hit 800,000. So for me, it's next week is going to be the question. What sort of ratings are we going to see next week, especially after WrestleMania? We all know that WrestleMania brings more eyes to all wrestling. Mm-hmm. So next week, will we see this same thing? Now, next week's card is looking very, very, very tasty. Lots and lots of really good matches on there. So that's going to be the thing, and I look forward to talking about that with yourself and other people about whether or not that is maintained. But for me, yes, it's great, but let's see what next week happens, because next week is going to be the real test. They're still unopposed. There's no WrestleMania around. So are they going to maintain this audience? And that is going to be the real question.
I think you said the $1 million phrase right there. More people in wrestling is good. That's what we all want ultimately. And I don't think I think there's this kind of almost like a straw man that is constructed by wrestling fans about wrestling fans who are like gatekeepers. Like, we don't want people watching our wrestling because it's, because wrestling is this special thing that we have. I have never met a wrestling fan that doesn't want more people to be watching this stuff. I would love for every show on earth to be doing, a 4 or a 5 the way that they used to in the 90s. I would love if wrestling was on that level as far as, the number of people watching, the number of eyes. That would be my ideal. So, Ryan, I think you agree with me. I think, people, we want more people watching wrestling. So, looking at this ratings war in quotes, it's not a war to me. It's just, how many people are watching wrestling. When you look at this, what are your thoughts on it? Beyond just the numbers, what are you seeing here that makes you more hopeful for the future of this thing, wrestling, that we all love so much? Oh, the ratings don't want Ryan again. We apologize. Ryan's had some internet issues. That's all right. Things happen.
That's right. Look, I just want to mention one other thing. So there is an article on Pro Wrestling Musings that I did, which was actually a breakdown, and I alluded to this just before, about the YouTube video views in regards to this, because during the last investors call, WWE said that the way that people are watching wrestling has changed. Mm-hmm. These stats that we talk about, these are great, but we've got to remember, this is just for America, watching live only. This doesn't go around the world. And I mentioned it before.
What else is there to say that Anthony haven't already said? You pretty much nailed it again.
This is actually the weirdest thing I've ever heard from Ryan's internet. Like, it just freezes for like 30 seconds, and then it just fast forwards him through. All right, we'll get to Ryan, but Anthony, I want you to finish your thought on this article.
Yeah. So, in regards to that, the WWE said that, hey, look, the way people are viewing this wrestling now is really different. They're no longer watching it, in mass with this numbers. I'm back. So yeah, they're basically saying, they're now watching it on the social media. They're now focusing more on watching the small snippets, the small little bits on YouTube. And I just mentioned before that, the video of NXT of all 3 champions on the WWE YouTube has now been viewed more than AEW was viewed live, and that was like a 4 or 5 minute video. So that just shows my point. That's a worldwide view. So we know that, over 1.2 million people online are invested in that segment alone. And that just shows you that, we shouldn't be taking any. These numbers mean literally nothing to us as fans. They're great to see. They're great to argue. They're great to joke about. They're great to make memes about. But at the end of the day, what we all want to see is just an increase over them all. They literally only mean something to advertisers. That's it. We shouldn't take them too seriously. We should just be thankful that they're rising. And when they're going down, that's when we need to say, okay, well, what can we do to, help? Is there an old friend that I know that used to be in wrestling? Maybe I can talk to them and show them this segment involving these two wrestlers that I love, and get them to come back into wrestling again, because that's what wrestling is. It's a lot of lapsed fans that no longer watch the product. I was that myself. I used to watch as a kid. I stopped watching for many years and only got back into it because a friend of mine showed me Finn Balor, and I was like, I like this guy. This guy's great. So suddenly I'm back on the bandwagon, and I've done that to a few friends on my own. So I think for me it's very much a thing of let's get people into it, but at the same time let's not care about this number, because it really means nothing, especially when you're talking about worldwide views and worldwide interest in the product. That's where we can use the social media of the YouTube hits, the Twitter followers, the everything like that. That's where we're getting the true view on how many people are actually engaged in wrestling.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. I think Ryan's internet has finally forgiven us for how much stress we've put on it doing this podcast here, hopefully. So, Ryan, finally, we will go to you. Anthony, I think, has said perfectly that these ratings, they mean a lot to advertisers, but to us as fans, there's a lot more important numbers out there. So for you, what is encouraging to you about, what we've been seeing over the last few months? Fans start to return, pandemic starting to end, AEW and NXT no longer competing. What is encouraging to you about all these new developments?
Before I get into that, I want to apologize for my Wi-Fi. I promise by the next time I do one of these podcasts, I'll get a Wi-Fi extender or something. I got to fix this. But I think the biggest thing for me was the fact that I believe, if I read it right, this past episode of Dynamite was the second most viewed episode ever, which I know we just talked about how ratings don't really matter, but I think that's definitely a morale boost, if anything. Mm-hmm. The fact that this is the most viewed event since this thing started, that's kind of a huge deal, ultimately. And I don't know whether that's going to continue. I hope it does. I hope that people don't see this high number and think, okay, things will end up going back to normal or get better, and then just not watch, thinking that everything's going to be okay. I really, of course, we all want wrestling to be as big as possible. I think seeing that number, that 1.2 million, that's excellent, especially considering just how in recent years how far WWE has fallen with ratings. Yeah. I mean, what was it, like 6? Like 2014, I believe, that promo that Triple H did where he talks about not caring about the fans or whatnot. Ever since then, it's just been going crazy. I think as long as these companies let the fans know that they appreciate them, and as long as while doing that, they continue to put on quality programming, I think we could be seeing something of a resurgence in wrestling, especially coming out of a pandemic. Mm-hmm. In terms of quality, wrestling has pretty much never been better, besides like 90s Japan, Yeah. I think at this point, what I want to see is the indies to get just a little bit better, because as good as the indies are right now, I know this doesn't have to do with TV, but whatever. As good as the indies are right now, it's not like we're seeing any Bryan Danielsons, Chris Heroes, Samoa Joes, whatever. Mm-hmm. We're getting pretty close with guys like AJ Gray or Lee Moriarty, but ultimately that side of things has to get a bit better for me to really be fully hopeful that this whole thing that we love so passionately will continue doing good, you know?
Yeah. I think when it comes to the indies, the only argument I would have was the reason why the indies seem to be growing slower than a lot of these televised products is because the televised products are picking all of the best wrestlers off of the indies. And so to me, I think it's actually a good thing. Like I would love to see the indies, you know, I would love to see there be so many great wrestlers that the indies are filled with great wrestlers as well as the top companies in the world. But when you look at AEW, like almost all of their guys that are being pushed or are on track to receive a push, they came from the indies. There's not a lot of ex-WWE guys. And even in Impact, a lot of indie guys, not a ton of ex-WWE guys, just to take an example.
True.
So I think all that means that indie wrestling is having a resurgence in that we are now watching on our national television screens or on YouTube or Twitter, or however it may be. When we watch these major companies, we are watching the indie influence happen. They're just happening on a much bigger stage. So to me, I would say it's the indies might just trail in terms of more eyes on the product, more people that want to get into wrestling, and therefore more wrestling from the bottom up. But we're not just seeing different companies do like WWE style just in different places. AEW is an indie style company. They do that style of wrestling. And so we are seeing that take hold in a major market now and start to do better ratings. But I absolutely agree with you in everything that you said. One last thing that we need to get to when we talk about we've been talking about WrestleMania and WWE. Obviously, WrestleMania, less than a week old now. And over on ProWrestlingMusings.com, the wonderful Craig, the creator of Pro Wrestling Musings, he has compiled stats for both of the main events, Night 1 and Night 2. He says that he can't, because of the awful camera and directing, he can't watch more than a match on each night. And frankly, I can't blame him, but, you know, that's just, again, personal preference. But these two matches here, talking about Sasha Banks, Bianca Belair, and the triple threat, Daniel Bryan versus Edge versus Roman Reigns. Personally, I preferred the triple threat. I thought it was absolutely phenomenal. There's one thing that WWE knows how to do, and that is book a WrestleMania triple threat. They know what they're doing. I don't know who produces those matches, but they need a raise because they do a phenomenal job when it comes to that. But the looking at the stats on Banks versus Belair, this is a fairly typical heel versus babyface match. You can say what you want to about the build, but it looks exactly like you'd expect from a hated heel versus a beloved babyface, and that's kind of what we got. So I'll turn it over to you. We'll start with Ryan. Looking at the stats from these two matches, what do you think of our two main events, and more broadly, why is it that WWE can have what by all accounts is a very lackluster build for WrestleMania, one of the worst that we've seen in the last 10, 15 years, and still end up with two Dynamite main events, no pun intended, but two main events that are that everyone agreed were just fantastic? Why is that?
So I thought the build for the Night 2 main event was done excellently. The build for Banks versus Belair, it could have been so much simpler, but they had to throw in freaking Reginald, which I thought the build for that was pretty horrible. I think the reason why Banks versus Belair worked so well for me, well, ultimately, the fact that the match was so great almost negated the horrible build. I kind of view things like, if the build sucks, then the match has to over-deliver. And I think the match over-delivered, not only for historical reasons, but also because this was really Bianca Belair's coming out moment. We've seen Sasha Banks have incredible matches for so long, but Bianca Belair, everyone knows how great of a talent she is, but she hasn't had that signature match yet. I mean, matches against like Rhea Ripley or whatnot, they were fine, but nothing to really like show how good Bianca Belair is. And of course, Sasha Banks was the one to get her to that level and make Bianca Belair look just absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm noticing that Sasha Banks has more strikes, more submissions. Overall, just it looks as if she's just so much more powerful in this situation. So the fact that Bianca Belair was able to pretty much do it with 5 strike downs and only 1 finisher, I think that makes Bianca Belair look even better than she actually is. Mm-hmm. The actual structure for the match was very well put together, because even as Sasha Banks was looking like she could potentially win this thing, they made Bianca Belair look awfully strong, literally having her military press her up the steps and throw her in the ring. Oh my god, I love that so much. Something that I found pretty wild too was the fact that Belair had more taunts than Sasha Banks, which that feels like a very heel thing to do, but it works so well because Bianca Belair, she has this quality to her that, like, a confidence that's not necessarily heelish. Mm-hmm. Like, she knows she's awesome and she's gonna show it, but that never came off as her trying to be the bad guy or anything. Sure. Ultimately, I thought that match was pretty successful, obviously. Mm-hmm. Then for the Night 2 main event, I mean, what do you expect? They're 3 of the greatest wrestlers of our generation. Of course, they're going to go balls to the wall and throw everything they have in the ring.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that everyone recognized that about Roman Reigns, because obviously there's so much baggage when it comes to Roman and his failed push as a babyface a few years ago, and the boos raining down at the Royal Rumble in Philadelphia, like all of these moments. So I think a lot of people forget how great Roman Reigns is in the ring, especially when he can tell a story. He may not be able to do all the great technical things that Daniel Bryan can do. He may not be able to play with that emotion and show that fire that Edge is so good at doing, but goddamn can Roman Reigns tell a story in the ring. And when he's allowed to, he does, like we saw in this triple threat.
Compared to Daniel Bryan, especially, he's a basic wrestler, but what he does with the small amount of moves that he does is just mind-blowing. And I'm so glad people are seeing this. I was kind of in the position where I was also on the Roman Reigns hate train. And then, of course, he had the leukemia diagnosis, and that kind of put everything into perspective. Like, why do I really hate this guy? I don't hate him. I hate the way he's being booked. And There's no way I was going to him afterwards, because that's when I realized just how incredible he is as a wrestler, too. Mm-hmm. Even from the beginning of his run in WWE, it was clear, looking at the NXT promos he did, he's always been more capable as a heel than as a good guy. Mm-hmm. I'm just happy he's in the position he is now, I guess.
Yeah, I cannot disagree with you on that. Anthony, you follow WWE more than just about anyone in Pro Wrestling Musings, and you've written several articles detailing everything from the social media aspect of it to a great article right now that I suggest everyone goes and reads about the numbers behind every WrestleMania. That's over on ProWrestlingMusings.com. So you have followed this, and you know what you're talking about. So these 2 main events specifically, and the broader question about how can events be so good when the build is not, what did you think of this WrestleMania in comparison to some of the great WrestleManias that we've seen in the past?
Thank you so much for mentioning the article. I was actually going to do that myself, but it does help. So
I got you.
Yeah, look, for this, and I think this is just one of those things where we tend to forget that WWE has got some of the very best wrestlers in the entire world. And despite themselves, these guys are going to put on amazing matches because they are great at what they do. Mm-hmm. Um, I remember when we used to sort of get that build a couple of years back where they'd build towards each pay per view, and then it sort of suddenly stopped, and a lot of people reported saying, they're not really going to be focused on doing that now. They're going to be just focused on telling stories, whatever that story is, and however long it takes. That's what it is, and this is I think something that we see now, that these stories are taking place over a couple of different pay per views. So before ending, now for me, it's always about that. No matter what happens, they're going to be able to put on those good matches because, like I said, they have got some incredible talent, and they are so good at what they do that no matter what the story is, they know how to do this. WWE know how to make a pay-per-view. They know how to make a pay-per-view look good. They know how to put on a pay-per-view. They may not have some of the best stories. Sometimes the stories may fall flat. I'm still trying to figure out what the stuff was from WrestleMania.
Everyone is.
I'm trying my best. So Dave Meltzer actually gave that a minus star. Just for your information.
I'd actually agree with that. I think I said it at the time, that might be one of the worst WrestleMania matches of all time. And you know what? Again, you can disagree or whatever, but that match just didn't work for me.
Look, it was obviously a real shock. But I'm not going to go into that because that's another conversation for another time. The thing I guess I want to say is that, like I said, at the end of the day, WrestleMania was great. I loved it. It was very emotional. Night one was much better than night two. Night one was, to me, night one was what WrestleMania is. It was great for me, feeling those emotions of seeing fans in that capacity back, hearing the fans again. It is just something that is missing now. AEW obviously has limited capacity fans, and it is great to hear it when they're in there. But for me, just hearing the roars from that big crowd just brought me back to before the pandemic. Just like, yes, this is what it's about. And that, for me, the Banks and Belair match is where it's at. I just have nothing but great things to say about that match. Now, Meltzer actually gave that a 4. I think it was much higher than that. I think it was a great match. I think that the moment and everything around it was just presented as this is the moment. This is the moment that, that they're building for this, and it was just such a great imagery. Everything around it was really great. Obviously, the story leading up to it, very, very much not great, and I will not defend that. I will not defend that at all. But the match on the night, and that's what happens with this, is that WWE has a couple things in their favor. They've got A, great, fantastic wrestlers. B, they have a fantastic video packaging group who make amazing video packages that can build a feud in 2 minutes, and you just forget about everything. And if you just watch that video package and then you see the match, you don't need to watch anything else. It is just perfect, and that's, I think, where it comes in. Now, one little thing I'll just leave with is that up until this WrestleMania, did you know that the total fight time in ring for all WrestleManias was 71 hours, 47 minutes, and 31 seconds? Because I do. And that there was 378 matches.
Well, you know what? Everyone out there can know that too if they go to ProWrestlingMusings.com and check out Anthony's article, The Numbers Behind Every WrestleMania. You can be, well, not as smart as Anthony, but you can be close to as smart as Anthony, and ultimately that's all we can really hope for. I do think go ahead, man. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's really good to see that these matches are getting love. Now, for me, neither of these two matches was actually my favorite match. My favorite match was Sammy versus KO, because I've loved both of the guys for so long, and seeing them get that moment at WrestleMania, that one-on-one. Yes, I do not agree that Logan Paul should have been involved, but seeing them in a one-on-one match at WrestleMania was just, I can't even put it into words how great it was just to see that.
You know what? That's totally fair. I can't argue with you on that. I want to summarize, I think kind of what the three of us have been saying, which is WWE, for all of the issues, for everything that they do wrong, and there is a lot that they do wrong, they have said from moment one that they are a company about creating moments. And to me, as a fan, if I'm going to watch TV every week like I do with AEW Dynamite, I don't want moments. I want great stories. However, when I watch WrestleMania is only about the moments. That's all they want to create. They want to take a year of build and all of the stuff that they do and condense that into a few hours for me to watch Mania. And exactly what Anthony said, that's, they have this fantastic video production team that's all they do is they take the best moments, they pick them out, they condense them, they make you a video package that gets you hyped, and then they throw you into that match. And that's what they want you to feel. So I was watching recently to do some studying of my own to learn some of the tricks of this video production and all this that WWE does. I watched their recap before their video package right before the Daniel Bryan Triple H match at WrestleMania 30. One of the best video packages they've ever done. And here's the thing. You watch that, and it's this very concise, very tight package about, here's Daniel Bryan, what he's been through during his career, and he's been the perpetually, like he's been held down, and he's just, everyone loves him, and he can't reach the top, and finally he's breaking through, and, he becomes this character that you love, and Triple H is this awful, horrible dude that just wants to keep Daniel Bryan down because he doesn't like change, and he all this kind of stuff. He's like Dean Werther. Like, that's what they really got out of you. And it's like, my God, like I'm in tears at the end of this because I'm like, God, Daniel Bryan needs to win. You know what I mean? And you forget that Daniel Bryan was a world champion before this happened. He was a heel before this happened. Like, there was all this kind of stuff that's happened in Daniel Bryan's career before this, but none of that matters because I remember Daniel Bryan hoisting the two championships at the end of WrestleMania 30. I remember that. I remember what was in that video package. I don't remember anything that happened before that. I don't remember Daniel Bryan's heel run, all that kind of stuff. And that is the essence of WWE. They want you to remember the best stuff, the moments that they created for you. And for some people, that really, really works. And if it works for you, that's totally fine. If you love those moments, nothing wrong with that. Again, for someone who's going to watch TV every week, I want story over moments. I want what AEW gives me, consistent story that I enjoy week to week. But when I watch Mania and this is what WWE is delivering me, I'm not going to complain. They delivered me moments that I remember, that I really, really love, and ultimately that is WWE's MO, and they do it. They are successful with it, and that's all you can ask of a company that pitches themselves in that way. Wow. We got through a whole lot of stuff today on Pro Wrestling Musings. Again, you can check out all of our stats, follow along with us at ProWrestlingMusings.com. Thank you all so much for listening along, whether we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you are. Thank you so much for following along with us. We really, really appreciate it. Ryan, tell the people where they can find you when they're done.
Okay, so hopefully my Twitter username will be in the description. It's at RyanGorneault. It's much easier just to look in the description for it. You can catch me on Twitter there. I'll be writing more for Pro Wrestling Musings. I'm working on an article about Mayu Iwatani's championship reign, so look out for that. Hopefully that's coming out fairly soon. I appreciate you both for having me on, and I had a great time. I hope to do this again.
You got it, man. Anthony, please tell the people where they can find you.
Australia. Look, I live on Twitter. They can find me at Anthony Down Under. I'll just leave you with one last thing. I am really excited about this. Impact announced that Mauro Ranallo is going to call the main event between Kenny Omega and Rich Swann for the belt, champion versus champion at
That's
Rebellion.
right.
And I'm just excited to hear his voice again, because for me, my NXT fandom is, around his time, and I always appreciated his calling and how excited he got about wrestling. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah, I've got a number of articles on Pro Wrestling Musings. My next one is going to be a more social media reviews, but mainly in regards to Dark and Elevation and how the views have grown and not grown since their inception, I guess. So that is what I'm currently busy doing.
Wow, perfect. I can't wait to read that, just like everything you put up on ProWrestlingMusings.com. I am Griff from GA. You can go find me on YouTube at General Admission Wrestling, and head on over while you're there. If you're not listening on YouTube right now, head on over to the Pro Wrestling Musings YouTube channel, where we've got all kinds of interesting stuff going on over there. Our most recent video is talking about Ty Conti and why she has worked so well in AEW since she debuted. She was one of the cuts this past year, or last year rather, on Black Wednesday 2020, and she has had a total career resurgence in AEW. So that'll put a nice little bow on today's Pro Wrestling Musings podcast. Remember to subscribe either on YouTube or on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review. Give us a like on YouTube. There's so many platforms you could be on right now that I don't even want to try to describe all of them. Just wherever you are, do whatever it is that you're supposed to do if you like us. Again, thank you so much for listening. We will see you next week. We appreciate you so much for being here with us.